Please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista. The Wonderful History of Peter Schlemihl, the Man Who Lost His Shadow, by Adalbert von Chamisso. Translated by Frederick Henry Hedge. Chapter 7. My wish, dear Chamisso, is merely to submit myself to thy judgment, not to endeavor to bias it. I have long passed the severest sentence on myself, for I have nourished the tormenting worm in my heart. It hovered, during this solemn moment of my life, incessantly before my soul, and I could only lift my eyes to it with a despairing glance, with humility and contrition. Dear friend, he who in levity only sets his foot out of the right road is unawares conducted into other paths, which draw him downwards and ever downwards. He then sees in vain the guiding stars glitter in heaven. There remains to him no choice. He must descend unpausingly the declivity and become a voluntary sacrifice to Nemesis. After the false step which had laid the curse upon me, I had, sinning through love, forced myself into the fortunes of another being. And what remained for me but that where I had sowed destruction, where speedy salvation was demanded of me, I should blindly rush forward to the rescue? For the last hour struck. Think not so meanly of me, my Adalbert, as to imagine that I should have regarded any price that was demanded as too high, that I should have begrudged anything that was mine, even more than my gold. No, Adalbert, but my soul was possessed with the most unconquerable hatred of this mysterious speaker along crooked paths. I might do him injustice, but every degree of association with him maddened me. And here stepped forth, as so frequently in my life, and as especially often in the history of the world, an event instead of an action. Since then I have achieved reconciliation with myself. I have learned, in the first place, to reverence necessity, and what is more than the action performed, the event accomplished, her property. Then I have learned to venerate this necessity as a wise providence which lives through that great collective machine in which we officiate simply as cooperating, impelling, and impelled wheels. What shall be must be. What should be happened, and not without that providence which I ultimately learned to reverence in my own fate, and in the fate of her on whom mine thus impinged. I know not whether I shall ascribe it to the excitement of my soul under the impulse of such mighty sensations, or to the exhaustion of my physical strength, which during the last days such unwonted privations had enfeebled, or whether, finally, to the desolating commotion which the presence of this gray fiend excited in my whole nature. Be that as it may, as I was on the point of signing, I fell into a deep swoon, and lay a long time as in the arms of death. Stamping of feet and curses were the first sounds which struck my ear as I returned to consciousness. I opened my eyes. It was dark. My detested attendant was busy scolding about me. "Is not that to behave like an old woman? Up with you, man, and complete offhand what you have resolved on, if you have not taken another thought, and had rather blubber." I raised myself with difficulty from the ground, and gazed in silence around. It was late in the evening. Festive music resounded from the brightly illuminated forester's house. Various groups of people wandered through the garden walks. One couple came near in conversation, and seated themselves on the bench which I had just quitted. They talked of the union this morning solemnized between Mr. Rascal and the daughter of the house. So then, it had taken place. I tore the tarn cap of the already vanished unknown from my head, and hastened in brooding silence towards the garden gate, plunging myself into the deepest night of the thicket, and striking along the path past Graf Peter's arbor. But invisibly my tormenting spirit accompanied me, pursuing me with the keenest reproaches. These, then, are one's thanks for the pains which one has taken to support you, who have weak nerves, through the long precious day. And one shall act the fool in the play. Good Mr. Wronghead, fly you from me if you please, but we are, nevertheless, inseparable. You have my gold and I your shadow, and this will allow us no repose. Did anybody ever hear of a shadow forsaking its master? Yours draws me after you till you take it again into favor, and I get rid of it. What you have hesitated to do out of fresh pleasure will you, only too late, be compelled to seek through new weariness and disgust. One cannot escape one's fate. He continued, speaking in the same tone. I fled in vain. He relaxed not, but ever present, insultingly talked of gold and shadow. I could come to no single thought of my own. I struck through unfrequented ways towards my house. When I stood before it and gazed at it, I could scarcely recognize it. No light shone through the dashed-in windows. The doors were closed. No throng of servants was moving therein. There was a laugh near me. Ha ha! So goes it. But you'll probably find your Bendel at home, for he was the other day purposely sent back so weary that he has most likely kept his bed since. He laughed again. He will have a story to tell. Well, then, for the present, good night. We meet speedily again. I had rung repeatedly. Light appeared. Bendel demanded from within who rung. When the good man recognized my voice, he could scarcely restrain his joy. The door flew open, and we stood weeping in each other's arms. I found him greatly changed, weak and ill. But for me, my hair had become quite gray. He conducted me through the desolated rooms to an inner apartment which had been spared. He brought food and wine, and we seated ourselves, and he again began to weep. He related to me that he, the other day, had cudgeled the gray-clad man whom he had encountered with my shadow, so long and so far that he had lost all trace of me, and had sunk to the earth in utter fatigue. That after this, as he could not find me, he returned home, whither presently the mob, at Rascal's instigation, came rushing in fury, dashed in the windows, and gave full play to their lust of demolition. Thus did they to their benefactor. The servants had fled various ways. The police had ordered me, as a suspicious person, to quit the city, and had allowed only 24 hours in which to get out of their jurisdiction. To that which I already knew of Rascal's affluence and marriage, he had yet much to add. This scoundrel, from whom all had proceeded that had been done against me, must, from the beginning, have been in possession of my secret. It appeared that, attracted by gold, he had contrived to thrust himself upon me, and at the very first had procured a key to the gold cupboard, where he had laid the foundation of that fortune whose augmentation he could now afford to despise. All this Bendel narrated to me with abundant tears, and then wept for joy that he again beheld me, again had me, and that, after he had long doubted whither his misfortune might have led me, he saw me bear it so calmly and collectedly, for such an aspect had despair now assumed in me. I beheld my misery unchangeably before me. I had wept out to it my last tear. Not another cry could be extorted from my heart. I presented to it my bare head with chill indifference. "Bendel," I said, thou knowest my lot. Not without earlier blame has my heavy punishment befallen me. Thou, innocent man, shalt no longer bind thy destiny to mine. I do not desire it. I ride tonight still forward. Saddle me a horse. I ride alone. Thou remainest. It is my will. Here still must remain some chests of gold, that retain thou. But I will, alone, wander incessantly through the world. But if ever a happier hour should smile upon me, and fortune look on me with reconciled eyes, then will I remember thee, for I have wept upon thy firmly faithful bosom in heavy and agonizing hours. With a broken heart was this honest man compelled to obey this last command of his master, at which his soul shrunk with terror. I was deaf to his prayers, to his representations, blind to his tears. He brought me out of my steed. Once more I pressed the weeping man to my bosom, sprang into the saddle, and under the shroud of night hastened from the grave of my existence, regardless which way my horse conducted me, since I had longer on the earth no aim, no wish, no hope. End of Chapter 7. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista.